I've called Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia home for more than a decade, and just recently it was ranked third out of all cities in Asia and eighth in all cities globally by actual expats who actually live overseas. And today, I'm going to tell you the pros and cons of living in Kuala Lumpur. And what I loved about this recent report that said Kuala Lumpur was the third most livable place in Asia is that's from people actually living there, who've actually lived around the world, not the economist who tells you that Vienna is the best place to live with its high taxes and lack of freedom. So let's get into the pros and cons from someone who's actually been there. I have a home. We host Nomad Capitalist live in Kuala Lumpur. For, among other reasons, I want you to come and check it out. I think it's a great place to live, and we're going to talk about why. The first thing for a nomad capitalist is that Malaysia is a tax-friendly country. Malaysia has a territorial tax system. It is designed for income you earn, whether it's rental income, salary, what have you, within the country, that's taxed. The rates are reasonable. They're not super low. They're not super high. But income you earn overseas is not taxed. Now, you always want to look at if you are working in your business, particularly if you're living there full-time, what impact does that have? There may be a way to look at yourself from being an employee, different from you're the owner of this business that has profit. But if you have an offshore company, including if you have a company in Malaysia's own tax haven of Labuan, you can essentially pay zero or very little tax by living there. And so what Malaysia wants is they want you to come and contribute to their economy. They want you to shop in their stores, eat at their restaurants, buy property in their country. But what they do is they say, make money here, pay tax. Make money somewhere else, don't pay tax. There was talk of changing that. That's been postponed. It may be postponed indefinitely from what I hear. But tax-friendly country, that's the start. Obviously, another pro is you've got warm weather. Now, for some folks, it's a little hot, so I'll give you the pro and the con at the same time. It is humid. But what I like about the humidity in Kuala Lumpur is it's relatively predictable. Not entirely, but relatively. You know, in some of the rainy seasons, it's going to hit really hard, like a dog. It's going to rain like a dog around 5 o'clock every day. And you can plan around that. And you have warm weather year-round. So I'm now spending more of the winter months. I will go in September for Nomad Capitalist Live, but it's always pleasant. I don't mind walking around in the humidity. There is a lot of sunshine. So for me, yeah, you get a little sticky, but quite frankly, you'll see me sometimes wearing a long sleeve shirt. You'll see me wearing a pair of pants. Sometimes I'm wearing a jacket. I think you can do that there. And it's nice. I'll tell you what, beats 0 degrees in the winter. Another thing that's a pro is that it's extremely affordable. Now, I understand if you're a successful nomad capitalist, your number one goal may not be affordability, but there's still a pleasure of going and having an amazing lunch. If you go to the sanitized kind of street food market underneath the Four Seasons, you get lunch for like $2 or $3, and it's good and it's big. And there's just something that's, I don't care how successful you are, there's something that's satisfying about that. And then if you want to go and have dinner at Marini's on 57 and have the caviar and have the champagne, you can also do that. So there's a lot of consumer conveniences, but it's an extremely affordable place. I've long thought that a number of people who work in our company, who work remotely, should get digital nomad visas. If you make $2,000 a month, you can get one. They should go to Malaysia. I mean, for less than $1,000 a month, you can get a 3-bedroom apartment in a nice building in a good part of town, close to stuff with a pool outside and amenities, and just buying a property. If you want to buy, extremely affordable, $500,000 even in the city center, you'll get a lot, much more than you would get even in most places in Asia. So just for day-to-day living, very affordable for anybody. If you want to buy a property and have that flag planted there and diversify some assets into the country, the ringgit is at a multi-year low, to say the least right now. You can get something for $500,000. You can get something for less than that. And you're going to pay a lot less there for property than you would in Bangkok, Manila, obviously Singapore by a factor of a lot. What you've also got there is, even though it's affordable, stable banking. So if you need to open a bank account for, let's say, the MM2H or some other residence program, everything I hear is these banks are very well capitalized. Everything I read is positive. You've got some large banks. You've got some of the Singaporean banks that have branches in Malaysia. You have other countries' banks, but you also have Malaysian banks, which I think are well run. The largest bank is kind of a bunch of banks that didn't work out so well, but they just kept merging. Didn't fail, just merged. And so I'm not saying Malaysia is the banking capital of the world. If you can have an account in Singapore, that's where I would run my investments. I would not be buying investment products in Malaysia generally. If you want to buy some Malaysian stocks through your account, go ahead. But for your global investing, Singapore next door is much better. And by the way, that's another pro. Singaporean banks are going to understand why a Westerner wants to bank in Singapore just a little bit more. Oh, you live next door in Malaysia. We understand. In fact, what you'll hear at Nomad Capitalist Live this year is, once again, our Malaysian banker's coming. You get an account with him, you can get accounts in other countries, including Singapore. So sometimes you can use some of the regional banks to do that. It's also very easy to travel. CEO of AirAsia, Tony Fernandez, is speaking at Nomad Capitalist Live. He turned AirAsia into one of the biggest and arguably the best low-cost carrier in the world. And it's based at KLIA 2 in Kuala Lumpur. You can fly pretty much anywhere in Asia. They do longer haul flights now. I think they even go to Hawaii, but you can fly up to Japan. I think they go further west, but certainly all over Southeast Asia. And it's extremely cheap. And compared to a lot of the low-cost airlines you'd see in the US or in Europe, it's relatively friendly. It's kind of comfortable. They give you a nice meal. I mean, you pay $3, you get a really nice meal on board. So it's easy to travel anywhere you want to go. And if you're me, you want to fly Malaysian Airlines, you want to fly any of the other Asian carriers, very easy to get to lots of places in Asia where more than half the world's population lives. You're very close to seeing all those opportunities. So if you want to go and check out investing in Bangladesh, investing in Cambodia, investing in Nepal, or just tourism there, you're close by. And I think lastly, nice people, consumer conveniences, a lot of Western restaurants, but also a lot of local restaurants. You've got 3 different cultures. I like the multiculturalism. I think it's just a good thing that it's just always been there since Malaysia existed. And so you've got all the different cultures, all the different cuisines, all those different vibes that you can be a part of. And you've got great malls, great shopping. You have not quite Amazon, but you have similar local sites that will deliver stuff to you. You can get a lot of stuff there. It's not always quite as easy as ordering off of Amazon, but it's getting pretty close. And so you can see why we would want people to come to our live event, Nomad Capitalist Live, in Kuala Lumpur, because it's, quite frankly, I just want to show it to you. I think if you want to learn about how to reduce your taxes, how to have a plan B, how to diversify your wealth into hot markets, how to protect your wealth, I think you have to come and learn that and all the opportunities in the world by going out into the world. That's why we don't have our event, among other reasons, in Orlando or in Austin. You're not going to get the feeling of freedom that you have when you leave the Western world. You're not going to see just how great some of these emerging places are if you go to a ballroom in Orlando. And so that's why we have Nomad Capitalist Live in Kuala Lumpur. It's one reason why I'm really excited to show it to people this year. So let's talk about the cons. The first con is the time zone. And so if you're living in Kuala Lumpur full-time, it's GMT +8. So that's aligned with Western Australia. If you're coming from Australia or I suppose New Zealand, that works. And you have people from Australia, they generally go to Penang instead of Kuala Lumpur for the seaside. If you're coming from elsewhere in Asia, or if you work in Asia, I've got friends who they run their business in Asia. Obviously, you're in good shape. You're in the same time zone as China and others. Dubai, for example, you're 4 hours ahead of them. For me, we've got a big team in Tbilisi, Georgia, so same time zone, 4 hours ahead of them. So generally, for me, I like waking up a little bit later. Maybe I'll get up at 8:30 or 9 o'clock these days, and that works out very well there. I'll get some stuff done, send a few emails, do a few things around the house, make a pot of tea. Then I'll go out and I'll sit for a while and I'll start messaging people at 1 o'clock and when they come online. If you're working with people in Western Europe, 7 or 8 hours starts to become a bit of a drag. If you're working with folks in the US, you better be prepared for, or the Americas, you better be prepared for late nights. Just had one of our colleagues there for a month. You're up till 11, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning. I remember one time talking to folks until 3 in the morning, or you're flipping it and you're up at 5 in the morning and you're doing those calls to folks when it's 4 or 5 o'clock, 2 o'clock in Los Angeles, their time. So the time zone is the one thing that people who work with Western Europe and the Americas mention. If you trade stocks, let's say you trade US stocks, occasionally I'll go in to check on my stocks in the Americas. Yeah, it's 9:30 or 10:30 at night, those markets are opening. And so you're either adjusting to that or you're just catching people at the beginning and the end. There is a little bit less culture in Kuala Lumpur than some places. Now you've got some nice temples. And again, multicultural, you've got Chinese temples, Indian temples, you've got mosques, you've got something for everybody. Is there as much to do? No. I lived for about a decade of my adult life in Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm from in the United States. And I always thought Phoenix was kind of a similar example to Kuala Lumpur in that whenever someone would say, oh, I'm coming to Phoenix for a holiday, I'd be like, why? You going somewhere else? You going to the Grand Canyon? What are you doing? It's a good place to live. There's not a ton, I mean, there's things to do and there's nice restaurants, there's a lot of stuff. But if you're just looking to go out and spending a week sightseeing, it's not going to be as interesting as, I would argue, Hanoi. I'm not a huge fan of Bangkok. For me, it's Bangkok versus KL. I'm on the KL side. Others are not. But, Bali, obviously, or Taipei, Phnom Penh even. I mean, you have a bit more culture. Kuala Lumpur was a tin mining settlement, and so there's not as much of that culture. But for me, it's a great place to live. It's about livability. It is the best blend of affordability. I think it's the best value city in Asia, but you don't have as much stuff just jumping out at you everywhere. If you want to go and see a temple, you can, but it's not everywhere you turn. Certainly anywhere you go in Asia, the most successful expats, and I would argue they've become immigrants at this point, to Asia are people who know a little bit of the local language and they hang out with the locals. Now, they generally speak in English because they're command of the local language if they're hanging out with somewhat successful people. Those people know English better, but they're not hanging out with other expats. So if you're going to rely on that for friends, expats tend to come and go. I'm the rare person who spent so long in Kuala Lumpur. Most people I know have left. And so if you want to befriend locals, depending on what your interests are, most of the business people in Malaysia, there are some Malays in business and have met them, but there's a lot of Malaysian Chinese folks in business. And I think that what a lot of them have told me is, we do business more in Chinese. And so are you going to infiltrate those circles as much? I think if you already have a family, if you're bringing your spouse, if you're bringing your children, you can still meet people. But it's going to be a bit more difficult than if you go to like an English-speaking country, or if you go to a Spanish-speaking country and you speak fluent Spanish. So it's always a bit more of an adaptation. But however, I think that people are friendly. You can meet them. One thing that a lot of people say is it's a bad dating scene. I've got one friend, she's always decrying how bad it is for dating. There's a number of factors for that. Perhaps for men and women. I think you can make it work no matter where you go. Just knew someone who went to Kuala Lumpur and seems like met the love of his life. It's like I've never felt this way about somebody in all these years. So if you want to make it happen, you can make it happen. But I don't know that it has the reputation for being a brimming with dating opportunities. The other thing is people mention air pollution. People mention this about various cities I go to. I guess Mexico City, you can kind of tell. It never bothers me. But everywhere else, I don't understand this high levels of air pollution. Someone said particularly during the dry season. I guess during some of the, when they would do the burnings in Indonesia, you could kind of feel it a little bit. But that doesn't bother me. I don't know. But if you're very sensitive to air pollution, I don't think it's certainly not at record at high levels or world high levels, but it's higher than maybe some places in Western Europe. Toss-ups. Certainly is more British influenced. So if you're looking for that place that was never conquered, Thailand, that's what they sell. Certainly, there's other places that might be more stereotypically Asian. But again, for just daily life, after a certain period of time, the desire for kitsch somewhat goes away. And I think Kuala Lumpur, could you say it's a bit more Americanized and that a lot of people drive more so than most Asian cities? Yeah, I think it might be a place with one of the highest car ownership rates in Asia, and people have decent cars. Some people have bikes, but you see more cars than you would in a lot of Southeast Asian places. And so you have that British influence, the Americanization with cars. It's more of an influence on food in the culture. So call it what you will. Obviously, the majority of the country is Muslim. I think very liberal Muslim. That process doesn't bother me. We've talked at length about why I think some of the stereotypes around that are wrong. And so those are some of the toss-ups. But if you look at the rankings from actual people who have lived places, it came out ahead of Dubai. It came out ahead of almost every city in Europe. So people who've actually lived overseas like this better. I will say this. There was somebody who was talking to us and he said, great place to visit, which it is. I don't think it's the number one place in Asia to visit. I think it's the number one place to live. He said, listen, if you're making a decent amount of money, which he said was $3,000 or more, which I think people watching this could do, and you live in the nicer neighborhoods, then you're in good shape. You'll have Western standards. Everything will be nice. He says, if you're making less than that, constant traffic, smells and sounds, what have you. So, if you're a nomad capitalist, you can make money anywhere. You have a business, you have some kind of job or profession you can take with you. His number is someone who said, I didn't want to live there, was $3,000. He says that's the ticket to living a really nice life. And quite frankly, if you dramatically reduce your tax, if you want to rent and you get that down to $1,000, heck, I think that they're renting the less well-decorated versions of my place for several thousand. I mean, it's not that much to rent really nice places. Yields are not that high. Properties are not that expensive. So therefore, rent's cheap, eating's cheap, getting around even to other countries is cheap. So I think that any nomad capitalist can live in the best neighborhoods. And for that, to me, it makes it one of the hidden gems.